So I've got kind of a weird story for you here. As we know, cattle are not exactly a cheap resource. They are, in fact, a very expensive resource. If you've gotten so deep into the carnivore life or the concept of homesteading and traditional living and everything, you've at least given thought to buying a plot of land and grazing your own cattle on it. You've probably at least given a thought to it. And then you've thought about the cost. Land for one, a home on said land probably, and how much does cattle cost, including feed for the cattle when it's just not the season for them to be out in the fields grazing on grass, unless you happen to live in one of those regions where they can do so and get everything they need from the fields. You're probably going to have to at least supplement some extra feed during the cold months of the year. So you've looked at the cost and probably dismissed the idea. But what if you could get the cattle for free? Especially if you had experience with cattle. I mean, there's the other part. You need experience. I would not recommend anybody trying to raise cattle without at least having spent some time learning the basics from somebody. It can be kind of a daunting task. I know people who've tried. But what if you could get them for free? Even if you had to, or what if you could get them at a very low price? So we have this weird story in the news. And it comes from USA Today, and it really annoys me. And partially because there's a huge waste of food here, there's a huge waste of animal livestock here, and it just shows bureaucratic thinking at its worst. So we get our headline from USA Today. 150 feral cattle to be shot from sky in New Mexico National Forest as U.S. Forest Service issues kill order. All right, so your story is this. Right now they have 150 cattle, and these are feral cattle. I know that sounds weird to say, feral cows. But back in the 1970s, some farmer, for some reason, dumped a bunch of cows off in this national forest. And they've been there ever since the 1970s. To give you an idea, that means there are multiple generations of cows there that have been raised in the wild, and their only experience with seeing human beings is, hikers and things. And apparently they've attacked human beings out there. So I understand why the federal government wants these things gone, because they are a nuisance and they are apparently damaging some of the pristine nature of the wilderness out there. But they're going to just the kill order isn't to kill them and take them for slaughter, or to take them and turn them to food, because these are food animals we're talking about. These are cows, wild cows, probably very gamey tasting, but still food. They're going to have hunters take them out from the sky and then let their bodies just go back to nature, basically, to decompose out in the wild. And that's kind of a problem for me, because we're talking 150 head of cattle, and if each one of these cows weighs 700 pounds, do the math on that, and that's a lot of beef. That is a lot of beef. You could feed a lot of people. You could feed a lot of dogs. I mean, I don't know what. You could find a better use for this. Let's get a little bit of information from the story, though. Quote, the U.S. Forest Service announced its decision in a news release explaining that feral cattle roaming the southwestern area of the state pose a significant threat to public safety and natural resources. The move, set to take place in part of the Gila National Forest, sets the stage for more legal challenges over how to handle wayward livestock as drought maintains its grip on the West. The first of these legal challenges came from New Mexico's cattle growing and humane farming associations, which filed a lawsuit to stop the aerial shooting plan. A hearing on a temporary restraining order was scheduled for Wednesday morning. That would be, I believe, I believe that was just a couple days ago, Wednesday. If the government prevails, aerial shooting of the animals will take place from a helicopter Thursday through Saturday, according to the news release late last week. The memo defines feral cattle as cattle without brands, ears, tags, or other signs of ownership. Gila National Forest officials are asking people to avoid the area. Obvious reasons. And now you can imagine the cattle associations aren't exactly happy with this. Partially because, anything without a tag, animals can lose tags. People do try to steal cattle. Cattle rustling is still a thing. I live in cattle country. I talk to ranchers. Cattle rustling is still a thing. And I would imagine cattle rustling operations go wrong sometimes, and the stolen livestock has to be dumped, I would imagine. And so farmers aren't really happy about this, but they actually are upset about this for even better reasons. Let's get back to the story. Quote, Some cattle growers have said branded cattle could have strayed into the area over the past year because of fences and water gaps damaged during an unusually strong monsoon season, Forest Service reported. The agency says it's, quote, committed to continued efforts towards collaborative solutions and will continue to coordinate with permittees in their efforts to locate, gather, and remove their branded cattle from areas where they are not authorized. Cattle that are slain will be left to, quote, naturally decompose, federal officials said, and forest staff will work to make sure no carcasses are next to or in any body of water, designated hiking trail, or known culturally sensitive area. Tom Patterson, chair of the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association Wildlife Committee, said the group has tried to find a solution that does not involve ending cattle, including permits to gather and herd the animals out. But with snow on the ground, access is limited. Patterson said federal officials are not giving enough time to see if the directive will work. Easy is not an exception to their own rules. Frustration is not an exception to the rules, he said. Our society should be better than this. We can be more creative and do it a better way where you're not wasting an economic resource, end quote. And he's right. Now it goes on to talk about, the environmental concerns of having cattle grazing there and how they ruin stream beds and all the rest of it. Look, a 700-pound animal crossing a stream bed's probably going to leave some footprints in the stream bed, and when it relieves itself, it's going to go in the stream probably. We know that. That's a thing. Okay. But I'm not that concerned about their concerns on this. Honestly, I'm not. They're not the only animals there. They're not the only big animals there. Have you ever seen an elk? I mean, come on. These things are in national forests, too, and they're gigantic, and they outweigh cows often enough. Look, there has to be a better way to do this. Has to be, because these animals can be domesticated probably pretty easily by experienced cattlemen, of which there is no shortage of in New Mexico. But that's not even on the table. These animals could be hunted for food by people who get a special hunting permit to go in there and take the animals with them and then use them for food purposes, but they're not doing that either. This is really weird in a time where we're seeing beef prices going up at the grocery store. And again, I'm not saying this stuff should end up in a grocery store. I'm sure this stuff will taste different than even like your normal grass-fed, grass-finished beef. But this is a colossal waste. And I think we're seeing here just a wonderful example of what happens when we get government interaction with the food system. Curious what you think about this in the comments. So let me know what you think. Is the government handling this right? Should the cattlemen be permitted to go out there and try to get these cattle out of there? What do you think was the reason that a farmer left his cattle out back in the 1970s, and why this wasn't taken care of 50 years ago? Anyway, let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help, as does sharing this on social media. That helps a lot too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in today.